Well, hi everyone. First video without a microphone. I'm gonna hope and pray that this works. I'm a little bit closer to the camera so that my voice can be picked up a little bit better, but today we will be talking about Hayley Williams. Starting off as the lead singer to the band Paramore, Hayley Williams has decided to venture out on her own with this new debut album over here, Petals for Armor. It's been a while since we heard from at least someone of Paramore. The last album was 2017's After Laughter, and in my opinion, Paramore has been one of the more consistent bands in the pop punk emo realm. Ever since 2007, with the album Riot, they have been following up with albums that have been better than their predecessors. Brand New Eyes, the self-titled album, and of course After Laughter. And up until this point, and still to this day, I am a pretty big fan of Paramore. I always like their sound and their style, and I especially love Hayley Williams' vocal delivery and performance on a lot of the songs. They can deliver this somber tone that is very emotional, or these soaring melodies that are just goddamn gorgeous. So when I heard that she was going to make a album on her own, I was pretty excited, but I was also very hesitant because I had a few qualms with that idea. One, she could be making the same kind of music that her other band was making, which is something that I did not want. I didn't really want another album that Paramore could have made better, or that could have been easily put into a Paramore discography. I will say this album isn't that though, but my other qualm with this idea of Hayley Williams putting out a solo album was that it felt like it was going to be underwhelming. And what do I mean by that? Well, it could easily be a very mild attempt into another genre, or it could be something that just is overall underwhelming and just does not deliver on the idea of an artist delivering on a solo album that could be exciting or rewarding or have another approach to the sound that their band offers. Now, Hayley Williams had an interesting approach to releasing this album. She put out a good amount of singles. She also put out 2 EPs that preceded this album, and this album is split up into 3 different sections. It kind of reminds me of the way Denzel Curry released Taboo, but unlike that album, I feel like this album does not have a very apparent concept to it, and if it does, I am completely missing it. I will admit that, but I've been listening to this for a while now, and I still just have yet to find a concept running through all of these songs. So essentially we're getting 5 new tracks. That's really it on this album. This is essentially another EP. And I would usually complain about that, but I don't know, at this point, what the hell? It's 2020, everything's going to shit. Why not have artists put out albums in a weird way? I do have my criticisms with the way she has rolled out her album and the way album rollouts happen like this. Arizona Baby, for example, Moses Sumney's new album, which should be released next week. Whatever. The album rollout, I don't really think pertains to the quality of this record, but what does this album have to offer? It's definitely not up to snuff compared to her outing on Paramore, which might be a lame criticism to throw at this album, but I wouldn't throw it at this album because it's Paramore and it's Hayley Williams and they're connected. I mainly point it out because I feel like it's trying to do the same ideas but in like a different style. It's sort of taken the sounds and the styles of their self-titled album as well as their subsequent After Laughter and in a way dumbing it down. I mean, the songs on here are pretty stale for an alternative dance and art pop album. The instrumentals on a lot of these songs, not all, but a lot of the songs, are very minimal, very stripped back. You have a lot of just kind of percussive moments, a little bit of bass, some guitar work here and there, and of course Hayley Williams singing. And there's also one thing I would like to point out with this album, in that it's obvious Radiohead worship. Obvious, I'm not the first one to point that out, but I more or less see this as an influence to Hayley Williams, and it doesn't really take away the quality of the album itself. What really takes away this album and me enjoying it, it's that a lot of the songs are pretty boring. I think about half of the songs on this album leave so much more to be desired, for me at least. Songs like Leave It Alone, as well as Why We Ever and Taken. Songs that kind of feel like they're doing the opening track Simmer, but in a different way. They're almost like repurposing and revitalizing and remixing in some way what Simmer was doing, playing the same ideas over and over and over again. Rarely am I ever excited listening to this album, and maybe that's not what Hayley Williams is trying to go for, but if she was going for a sound and a style, I don't think she really executed it all that well. Look, I didn't go into this album wanting to hate it, and I don't necessarily hate really any song on here. I mean, there's a couple of songs that I just really dislike. For example, the track Creepin', weird song. But again, I didn't go into this album wanting to hate it, but I came out of it wanting to love it more and wanting to be more enticed by it. There are some good songs on this album, and a lot of the songs on here just kind of deliver adequate performances, maybe with the exception of the track Sudden Desire, where her vocals are soaring over this very simple instrumental. However, I think the contrast is beautiful, and it actually delivers one of the more empowering moments on this album. And the track Simmer has grown on me ever since I initially listened to it as a single, but even then, it still kind of goes on a little too long. I'm so happy that the longest song on here, Roses, Violet, Lotus, Iris, I always forget the title of that song. I'm glad that the longest song on here, this song in particular, is not boring. It actually has a pretty good flow and momentum to it. And the last two tracks are actually really good closers to this album. But other than those few highlights of this album, I just don't find this album to be super appealing, super punchy, or super, I guess, memorable. Look, for one, a lot of the instrumentals kind of repeat the same idea over and over and over again. Subtle bass lines, as well as some pretty rhythmic percussion that's going on, Hayley Williams' vocals, and the lyricism isn't that stellar either. I mean, it's kind of repetitive for the most part. And there are some songs in the track listing that just feel out of place, like the track Dead Horse. What? Sugar on the Rim, which isn't a bad cut per se, but it just does not feel like it's part of this album. It feels very disconnected with everything. However, the other criticism that I have with this album is that all of the songs feel way too samey. This album does not have a lot of diversity within all of these songs. There are just way too many tracks that feel very similar to one another, and I kind of get a sense of deja vu listening to this album over and over and over again. Not because I'm listening to the same songs, but because I'm listening to songs that sound very similar to one another. Not to diminish your enjoyment or the quality of this album as a whole, because I think it is a quality album, but I just did not get a lot of entertainment out of this, enjoyment. I guess I can just shorten it down to I didn't get a lot out of it. I feel like this record gives you everything it has to offer on initial listen, and once you get through that initial listen, there's nothing much else to get out of it. I mean, lyrically, again, it's not really dense, and the performances on here are adequate, but they're not really up to snuff to what I believe Hayley Williams can do. It just feels like a mild excursion into the sounds of art pop and indie pop, and I could say indie rock as well. Some dance music that were kind of displayed on, again, the self-titled Paramore album and After Laughter. But I can totally see Hayley Williams making a way better album, one that doesn't feel so milquetoast. Because if this is the sound and this is the style that she wants, she's either gonna have to do something lyrically that makes it more engaging, or instrumentally she's gonna have to be a little more out there, more left field, or more ear-grabbing. All of these tracks seem very dull and unmemorable, and again, while I'm not looking at this album and saying I'm never gonna listen to Hayley Williams ever again, I will check out her next album, and of course the next Paramore album. Again, I love Paramore, but this just kind of feels like a mild excursion into the sounds of art pop and indie pop that feels so tame and so almost lifeless that they feel extremely calculated. And I feel like this record also has a problem where it was thought about way too much. Like, everything seemed super calculated, super thought about, and while I do like thought about records, this just seems way too tame. Again, not a bad album, but personally, it's one that I find pretty mediocre. And again, when the performances are good, they're only good. I don't think there's a moment of greatness or amazement of this record. And the song that comes closest to that is the track Sudden Desire, easily a standout track amongst the songs on this album. For me personally, this record is a C. It's kind of disappointing, in all honesty. However, I am curious to know what are your thoughts and opinions on this album down below. Let me know what albums you want me to review next, and that is it. Like, comment, share, do whatever you want. Let me know how I can improve future videos down below. Remember, this is only my opinion, because music is subjective.